Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the wholly predictable situation whereby Conservative MPs are now starting to panic about Beergate as they realise it could actually do them more harm than Labour. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So sorry to be doing another one on the dead cat story, but this has just become fairly hilarious. Beergate, the grand Tory plan to smear Starmer with the same muck covering Johnson, could well be what loses the Tories the election, depending on how it plays out. Now, when I last talked about this, I said that Labour could really turn this Daily Mail Beergate campaign against the Tories. Sadly, Starmer has not yet done this. It's not too late, but he really at the moment doesn't sound like he's getting ready to do this. But with something like this, the time is not all that tight. So if he sorts it out in the next day or two, it's fine. But I'll return to that later. Even though Starmer is not playing his best hand over this, the Tories are still worried. Jacob Rees-Mogg, Minister for Brexit Opportunities, was being interviewed yesterday, and he was asked if Starmer should resign if fined by the police. Tricky. Because if Rees-Mogg says yes, then he would be asked why Johnson doesn't resign. After all, Johnson's crimes are greater. He wrote the rules. The parties were more blatant. At worst, the Daily Mail are hoping that Starmer gets done because the police don't consider his meal arrangements reasonably necessary. It's not going to happen. I mean, this is all speculation because it's nonsense. But that's the best they can hope for. The Downing Street parties involved proper boozing, blaring music. They were spilling out pistos farts in the early hours. One party got so boisterous that garden furniture was broken. Remember that the Met are not even investigating all the parties. Remember that. Only the worst dozen or so. They've said that. We're not going to bother with anything unless, other than the most egregious ones. I can't remember the word they used. See, remember the photo of the garden party where they were eating and drinking? There was no work, no laptops, no notebooks, nothing. You know, Johnson claimed it was work. Do you remember that? Much less clearly work than Starmer's curry, and yet the police aren't investigating that because as far as they're concerned, there might have been laws broken, but we're just going to focus on the really serious ones. The regularity is also worse. These Downing Street parties were happening all the time, literally all the time, every week. And Johnson denied that any had occurred in Parliament, so he lied about them in Parliament. Starmer hasn't denied anything about this in Parliament. He hasn't denied having the meal. And finally, what really pissed people off about Partygate wasn't even the lies or the law breaking. It was that loved ones had to die alone. And it was Boris Johnson who ordered that. It wasn't Keir Starmer. It was Boris Johnson. So Rees-Mogg couldn't possibly answer the yes. He couldn't possibly say that Starmer should resign. But he couldn't say no either. Because then he'd be asked why law breaking should not be a resigning matter. So he dodged the question. And he said, we shouldn't be talking about this. There's more important things to talk about. Imagine that. A Tory cabinet minister, when you've got something that should be putting Labour under immense pressure right now. And they're the ones saying, we shouldn't be talking about this. We should be talking about something else. You know, the Daily Mail's using this to attack Labour, and you've got a Tory being evasive about it. Then I saw a report that the Tory whips are trying to get MPs to tone it down on Beergate. They are frantic that it could cost them the next election, and the Daily Mail will have scored the biggest own goal in their history. Reason being, let us say Starmer is fine. Now, there's lots of reasons why this isn't going to happen. I'm not going to go over those again. But let's say he is. He'll resign. That gives Labour the moral high ground. Now, I've already discussed this. If Starmer resigns, it'll be a blow, but Labour have got leaders of equal value. I don't think they've got anyone who's clearly better to replace him with, but I do think they've got ones who are on balance about the same. They'll not be as good in some areas, might be better in others. And once done, Labour will claim that they are the party of integrity. Starmer will have resigned for a clearly minor and inadvertent breach at worst, but Boris Johnson lingers on, having committed far greater and more serious breaches. Then what do the Tories do? Do they keep Boris Johnson regardless? Then they're bollocksed. Do they get rid of him? Well, then they look like they're just doing it as damage limitation, because why didn't they do it a long time ago? And they've got nobody decent to replace him with. That's why he's still in place. Tory whips are shitting themselves right now. We have the mad situation where strategically, never mind the rights and wrongs, strategically, the Conservatives are desperate for Starmer to be cleared by the police, and Labour would benefit from him being fined. I don't want to say Labour wants him to be fined, but it would be strategically beneficial. I don't see it happening, I've already said, but this is a win-win situation for Labour now. And I will say they need to take full advantage. So far, they are not taking advantage of this. It's really distressing. So far, Starmer has played this poorly. There was a report in the iPaper suggesting that some Tories are pleased with Beergate. The Tory whips might be frantic, but there's some Tory MPs think it's going terribly well. Presumably the idiots who don't see the dangers themselves. See, it's reported they see this smear campaign from the Daily Mail as a stress test for Starmer, and one that he's failed. Now, I would agree that he has played the PR game poorly. You know, if you look at it as a stress test, and you absolutely can, has Starmer played it well? No, he has not. I said in my last video on this, Starmer should have gone on the attack, and he didn't do so. And he still hasn't done so. When tackled about it in the media, he came across as irritated and evasive. Now, it's not that he's trying to avoid the questions as such. He's trying to focus on key issues. He knows that, you talk about Beergate, that's not doing anything to sell Labour to the public, so he doesn't want to do it. But he failed to recognise that all he was doing was reacting in the way that Boris Johnson does at PMQs. In PMQs, Boris Johnson frequently complains about the questions. Say, why are you asking me questions on those? Aren't the right questions. I'll tell you, I'll give you some questions to ask me. You're saying the opposition MPs should be asking about different things. It's not up to him what questions are asked, and it's not up to Starmer what questions the media ask him. Yes, you can argue that a professional media organisation should be asking about important issues and not what are obviously politically motivated distractions. And, if it were the case that there were some evidence that suggested that maybe Starmer has broken the law, absolutely the media should be all over it. But there aren't. And they know that. And everyone knows that. But that's not what we have. We don't have a professional mainstream media. We have a mainstream media that is largely owned or heavily influenced by right-wing interests. Any Labour leader needs to deal with that reality. I keep saying it through multiple leaders. You can't complain about it. That's the way it is. Yes, these dead cats are bothersome. Yes, it takes up valuable time when you want to discuss your own policies. But these are the hoops that have to be jumped through, and Starmer has failed to do that. The Tories know that the actual damage from Beergate is not serious for Labour. They know that. That's fine. They fabricated a scandal. They can fabricate others. And they will do. And what's more, they'll be encouraged to. Starmer fell into their trap. Instead of attacking, he was defensive. Instead of answering the questions clearly, but also quickly, in order to move on, he was evasive. Even if, and when, the police clear him, he's damaged his credibility with poor PR skills. But it's not a serious problem just yet. Let's just be clear about why the Tories are doing this. Boris Johnson's reputation is shot. There's no coming back for him. The public see him as a liar and a fraud. He's a criminal too. Undeniable. Nothing the media or party machine can do can rescue that reputation now. But it's not absolutely essential that they do so. At the election, many people will vote for who they think will be the best Prime Minister. It comes down to a presidential-style popularity contest. If they think that Starmer is just as dodgy as Johnson, then that black mark against Johnson's name is nullified as a liability. It doesn't exist because people don't factor it in because as far as they're concerned, both prospective Prime Ministers are as bad. If Starmer gets through this, as I still fully expect, he has to be ready for the next fabricated scandal. I think Starmer's problem is maybe his experience as a lawyer means he's used to arguments based on logic and firm legal footing. He won't have had to experience a court case where he's presented a strong argument and the judge just says, yes, but what did the defendant have for breakfast? What? What's that got to do with anything? He's not used to it. It's outside of his experience. But he has to catch up. An interviewer will argue that black is white if they want to. Be prepared for it. Be interesting to see what Labour do about this episode. I'll never know because the discussions will be behind closed doors. But there are several possibilities. First, they can ignore the whole thing, just wait for it to blow over. Wait for the police to clear him, then carry on as if it didn't happen. Foolish. Because it means you're not prepared for the next onslaught and will fare no better. It's a little bit like us in the pandemic. Because we're not learning lessons from COVID, we're not going to deal with the next one. It's not even like we're dealing with COVID right now. Second, they could whine about the biased media as happened during his predecessor's time. Also foolish. You still learn no lessons. You just waste time learning no lessons, and you're still knackered when the next one comes along. Third, they can realise that this is going to keep happening, that this is the lay of the land, that this is the political battle they have to fight. And the more likely Starmer looks to be able to win a general election, the thicker and faster these campaigns will come. They need to work out what to do about them. My advice would be as follows. First, accept that they will come. Don't worry about the questions wasting the time you want to spend on policies. The time will be wasted anyway. If an interviewer asks those questions, that time has already been wasted. Nothing you can do about that. It's only a question of, do you use that time to look calm and collected like a cool-headed Prime Minister? Or do you look evasive and irritated like someone who can't cope in a crisis? The first response is better. Smile. Answer the questions quickly but clearly. Don't wait for the next question. Then start talking about a key policy. Do not wait for the next question. You just keep talking. You've gone in there wanting to talk about a thing, talk about the thing. You work out the best way to present a clear and concise response because you know what the questions will be in advance. If you get an opportunity to turn the issue against the Tories as well, do that. Keep smiling, keep answering, and keep talking about policies until the interviewer is rude enough to interrupt you. Then answer clearly and concisely again and carry on talking about what you want to talk about. Second, keep attacking the source of these campaigns. They'll not come from lots of different sources. They'll come from the client media or Conservative MPs. Point it out. Point out the party political nature of it all. Talk about the fact you've been investigated more thoroughly than Boris Johnson, because Keir Starmer, after this episode, will have been investigated twice by the police for the same thing, a meal between work, a meal. Boris Johnson is not even being investigated for the same things he did. He's only been investigated on a light touch, no interviews or anything like that, questionnaires, on like the dozen most egregious breaches. And he can say that, Starmer, after all this, can say there was no untoward behaviour ever found. Turn it back into a question about how Johnson has failed in his duty. And third, look for opportunities for gains. I've said before, Starmer could have used Beergate to his advantage. He's missed the opportunity. It's not forever. He could still row it back. It's just, it doesn't look like he's going to. But don't miss another opportunity the next time. Learn from it. Get good advice. Seriously, Starmer needs to get good advice on how to deal with this. I have been quite impressed that Starmer really seems to listen to people and is committed to getting Labour back into power. But right now, my advice would be for Starmer to make clear he's done nothing wrong, but that if the police determine otherwise and his appeal fails, he will categorically resign. Take the fight to the Tories on this. Make them regret this smear campaign. I still say we're into I'll eat my hat territory if Starmer isn't cleared, because it's ridiculous. But you just feel that it would do Labour some good if he were fined and drop the Tories right in it. I did mention that British politics is insane, didn't I? But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. Maybe even click on the join button if you'd be interested in memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.